We're rising, we're falling, 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 we're rising, we're falling with Evan Ringler from PlayerProfiler, head of the analytics team. We got guys moving up, we got guys moving down in seasonal leagues, in Dynasty, and Theo and Evan and I have been debating what to do with certain players, and there's also some philosophical debates and, positions to take. Hey, what do we do in this situation? Is this right? Like, are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to do it this way? The algorithm doesn't know what it doesn't know yet. Can we start to maybe assume certain things happen in the future that affects the rankings now? Are we disrupting the space-time continuum? Is this allowed? Are we allowed to do this? That's the question. We have a lot of questions. We have specific players moving up, moving down, that are about to move up or move down. And we also have these philosophical questions about the rankings process. Welcome, Evan Ringler, once again.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go. Let's talk about it. Justin Herbert has been playing better recently, and Justin Herbert's had some amazing fantasy seasons. And he was viewed as one of the top dynasty quarterbacks, and now he's in his super prime, and he's in his most stable situation of his career, and he's fallen back. He's fallen back. This, to me, is an opportunity because he's not Trevor Lawrence. Like, he has proven that he can be a QB1 in fantasy. He's not a guy that's been hovering around QB 13 his whole career with just the draft capital at his back. It's very different. Then we also have Ladd McConkey, who, according to the opportunity metrics on PlayerProfiler.com, is an excellent receiver, a true target earner that we rarely see as a rookie, and yet we're seeing a bunch of these guys this year. This is one of the great rookie classes for quarterbacks and wide receivers, stacking. So where has McConkey moved since we last spoke? We talked about a month ago, so this show is a monthly show. We reconvene every month, talk about where these guys are moving. How far has McConkey moved since the late October show we did?
Well, we've always had him in that wide receiver 2 to 3 range where it's very flat and there's a lot of guys there. But right now he's up to around wide receiver 24. And I think that's up from roughly wide receiver 32. It's not a huge jump, but we do want to get out in front of it a little bit because the metrics are so good. I think he has a 32 or 33% target rate versus man coverage, which is just truly elite stuff. Wide receiver 1. This guy can do literally everything you want out of a wide receiver.
And he has the matchup this week. And it should be he and Herbert linking up. This is the week, man. Isn't this big stack week for Herbert and McConkey? This was a week where, when I look at the slate, what I like to do is I like to kind of make myself ready to receive information from the universe by sort of blurring out my vision, trying to meditate, and then opening my eyes and looking at the slate and let the universe tell me. And this week it told me stacking. This is a week to stack. This needs to be the theme of the week. So I was like, okay, it's not me. It's not me. It's the vibration patterns of the universe telling me this is the week of all weeks to stack. And Herbert McConkey feels great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the Bengals defense sucks versus the run and the pass. And the part that really makes this stack interesting is that the Bengals offense should be able to keep pace, which will, Herbert will have to throw more as opposed to just running the ball with Dobbins.
Game total is 48. How do you feel about that?
Beautiful. I think I would probably take the under or lean the under just because the Chargers defense is really good. And they tend to play at a slow pace.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the pace of play is what I think will drag that game into the under category. How much does that defense and the pace of play of the Chargers affect Jamar Chase? Should Jamar Chase still be the wide receiver 1 this week?
I think so. Well, T. Higgins is back now. He might not be the wide receiver one, but he's definitely in that top 3 or 4. It's a conversation, but it's not like the Chargers have some lockdown cornerback that's going to shut him down. He's going to get his no matter what.
Right.
So no concerns.
Well, I saw on Fast Draft, so we have Fast Draft DFS, FastDraft.app, and essentially what you can do is you can submit your rankings and just order 5 drafts and click a button, say, hey, or you could say, I want 2 drafts with these rankings with the Achane up top, and then I want 2 drafts with McCaffrey up top, and then I want 1 draft with wide receiver X up top, or I want 1 draft with George Pickens moved way up to make sure I get Pickens, something like that. You can do that. So that's called the Turbo Draft feature on Fast Draft, or you can just go in and drafts take 5 minutes. You can just draft a bunch of teams. And the first few drafts that happened had Jamar Chase at the 101, and then you saw there was an adjustment period, and then now Achane has been the 101 in draft after draft after draft that's happening on Fast Draft. So it's an interesting thing to kind of watch the sensibilities play out. So what do you do if you believe McConkey is going to have a big game? It's almost destiny. What is there? 80% chance that he goes over his season average for fantasy points this week, at least?
Yeah, something like that.
Is that fair? Knowing that, should we just get out ahead of this? Right? So the algorithm that powers the lifetime value of dynasty rankings is based on all these underlying assumptions, right? They talk about, the humans can always put their finger on the scale of the AI, and how is that possible? Well, the inputs that go into the model are ultimately decided by human beings. And there is a judgment call that has to be made. Okay, what is this player's target share going to be next year, the year after that? These are some of the inputs that have to be put, and then the lifetime value gets generated from there. Knowing that his opportunity metrics are going to be high, his efficiency has been good, what is our philosophy on just, hey, we're doing fantasy gamers a service. We think there's an 80% chance this guy is going to accrue value in fantasy football in all formats this week. What's stopping us? What should stop us from just vaulting him?
Nothing. I like to get out ahead. That's what I think the optimal strategy is. We want to move him up this week so that our subscribers know to go trade for him this week at a slight discount, and then they'll see that return on the lifetime value.
Good. I mean, this is what I believe should be done. But again, you're the ultimate arbiter here, and I just want to make sure that we're doing this the ethical way, that this is the right and proper way, that it's not so much ethical as it is really, it's just, is this sustainable? Right? I always like to think of a world where, okay, take me out of the equation. How would this work in a more mechanical way, in a more sort of regulated and automated way in the future? But also a systematic approach, a more systematic approach. Let's say 6 months from now, a year from now, can we get away with doing this kind of thing? And the answer in this situation, I think, is yes. I think it's the right thing to do. And the bottom line is, we just have to find a way to make it systematic, right? That's all we have to do. Okay, take me out of the equation. Well, we can also write that into the model. If we see a big game coming, we can overweight the next game, and that will accomplish what we're talking about. So it can be that you're putting the finger on the scale or your thumb on the scale in a particular moment, and really what's happening is we are recalibrating the model, the projection engine, and it can actually be applied for all rankings in the future appropriately. So that's what's kind of cool about what we're doing now. This is what I love about having you aboard, is that I know that these decisions aren't just made in a vacuum, that the things we're doing are constantly improving and optimizing our process, making it more systematic, making the rankings and the projections weekly, seasonal, dynasty better for the long run. And I mentioned this Russell Wilson, George Pickens stack. Does that apply to Pickens too? I mean, this is the smash of all smashes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have him at wide receiver 5 this week, and I think wide receiver 4 is even in play. It's just the perfect matchup. There's going to be several deep balls thrown to Pickens, and if he catches them and takes them to the end zone, he could put up a 30-point week fairly easily.
160-3 is in his range of outcomes.
100%.
It is. It's absolutely in his range of outcomes. That's why when I look at these fast draft, ADPs, I'm like, what? 15th player off the board, George Pickens? You guys are fucking up, man. Yeah, that's my opinion. That's just my opinion. I think on fast drafts, Flex 6 Frenzy, Pickens should go at the 1-2 turn. When he doesn't go at the 1-2 turn, I'm shocked.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I would like to mention that I do think it's fairly volatile when you look at Pickens' production that we expect on a week-to-week basis. With Russ so far, it has hit at a high rate. But eventually there are going to be weeks where they just don't connect on those deep balls. And that's really all that Pickens has. So if he doesn't make those plays, then all of a sudden you're looking at somebody that's putting up like 6 points,
That is my concern about Pickens, is that given the lack of talent around him in that offense, his target share is lower than I expected it to be. So he's winning with explosive plays. He has the number 1 explosive rating on PlayerProfiler.com. EPX ranks number 1, 137.0. His target share is good, right? 28% is good. His air yard share is good, 42%, but he's not top 5. And his targets per route run is 27.7, which is number 14 in the league. I would have expected him to be top 10 given the other options in target rate. And so that's just the slightest concern, and I think that is what's holding him back from being a true alpha is, number 1, his offense. It's not a high-volume offense. And then number 2, he's not the target earner of the most elite wide receivers in the league. So he's in that, whatever that next tier is, he belongs in that next tier.
Yeah, I will say, though, that both the target share and air yard share I expect to increase throughout the season because he's playing with Russell Wilson now, who has an average depth of target of 9.9, which is behind only Anthony Richardson. Russell Wilson can only throw to the sidelines. He can only throw deep down the sidelines, and that's where Pickens excels, which is why Pickens has produced so well since Russ has taken over. Meanwhile, Fields was a much lower depth of target at 7.5, which doesn't really fit Pickens' play style.
Great point. That's terrible news for Pat Freiermuth.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Pat Freiermuth, poor guy. Put him on any other team, right?
Yeah.
We've had to lower Jake Ferguson recently, right?
Yeah, to say the least.
And why was Jake Ferguson ranked as high as he was ranked? Because of the situation. Because he was arguably the second option for the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. But when you take that away, that's the problem with ranking a player like Jake Ferguson in Dynasty. What have I said to you and Theo about players like Jake Ferguson in Dynasty? Share this with the people.
I'd say at least 5 times this season you've mentioned players like Jake Ferguson that just are Jags with no talent that we tend to overvalue because of production.
And situation. And the problem is situations change. Guys break their pinky, and the next thing you know, Jake Ferguson's putting up 3 for 13. It's fucking over.
Yep.
Okay? It's over. And I don't want guys like that in Dynasty. Situation-based players in Dynasty are terrible. In fact, I wrote about it in this book, The Dynasty Dominator. Okay? That you need to be careful about situation-based players. And so Jake Ferguson, I mean, that's a sell low candidate. Like this is a player who's going to zero.
Ferguson? Next Ferguson, is it K. Doughton?
K. Doughton looks pretty bad. I mean, what other receivers are in that passing? Is it Sterling Shepard?
Yeah.
That would be the reason. The reason to get out of K. Doughton for whatever you can is Sterling Shepard.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that...
I mean...
It's possible. Anything's possible. But...
Yeah.
I mean... let's look at the top Dynasty tight ends right now. Let's go to the top Dynasty tight ends at this moment, okay? Brock Bowers, athlete. Trey McBride, athlete. TJ Hawkinson, athlete. Dalton Kincaid, we don't know. He didn't test. I heard he was an athlete. I was told he's an athlete. Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Tucker Kraft, top 12, all 80th percentile plus athletes. And then you've got K. Doughton. Now you're at K. Doughton, Jake Ferguson, and they're checking in that tight end 14 and below zone. And suddenly this is where you get to guys that are running a 4.8 40. This is not a coincidence. This is how the NFL works. To command targets from that position, you got to have explosiveness down the seam. That is what you need. And if you can, or you need to be elite after the catch. Tucker Kraft, he's the guy in there that's not really delivering the target depth, but he is giving you the yards after the catch. And you need athleticism to do either one of those two things. That's the problem. Now we have an concerning chat item here. Charlene Gehrig, have you heard anything about the Darnell Mooney Achilles injury?
I don't know anything more than the public knows that Mooney popped up on the injury report this week and it listed Achilles. That is fairly concerning.
Yeah. Did he practice at all?
That came out of nowhere. That's a good question. I didn't check yesterday. I can check right now, though. Okay,
let us know in the chat. Did Darnell Mooney practice? Because if he practiced, then it's like an irritation.
Okay.
Or I heard of like Achilles tendon and with a tendonitis issue, right? Achilles tendonitis.
Yeah, so he popped up on the report yesterday. He fully practiced Wednesday.
Okay.
And then was a limited practice yesterday.
All right.
So
I'm guessing it's a tendonitis.
I don't think it's a panic sell situation, but it is slightly concerning.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Is that going to affect his week 11 projection?
Probably a bit, yeah. I mean, he'll have to drop some, and we'll give that target share to Ray McLeod, who becomes a somewhat interesting play.
So he's a deep DFS play, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. What are we doing with the Texans? Because in the season rankings, you have Nico Collins, though he hasn't played in over a month, very high. Like I think in our season rankings, Nico Collins is wide receiver 4. So can you justify that for the people?
Well, I think that the Texans have really been missing Nico Collins. They have been struggling to move the football, especially on first and second down. And Tank Dell has come along recently, but I really just think that they're going to throw the ball to Nico at every opportunity that they have. And, all the metrics from early in the season totally support this ranking. He has elite metrics in every category you look at.
Okay, so if we're vaulting players because we see an 80% chance they're going to smash this week, what about the percentage chance being high that a player duds out this week? So could we potentially move Pickens ahead of London in seasonal leagues? Do you think that Pickens outscores London? London faces the Broncos this week in Denver. So is that one you get out ahead of?
I'm not, I think that they are right next to each other in our seasonal rankings. I moved Pickens ahead this morning for transparency purposes in
Okay,
the
good.
seasonal.
Okay, we didn't talk about this. This was just something that just needed to be done.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it was related to that matchup. But at the same time, I'm not. I'm still starting Drake London, no question about it. He plays mostly a slot role, and I don't expect Surtain to follow him there, which does help, even though I'm not projecting huge points for the Falcons this week.
You have Drake London, wide receiver 6 in Dynasty. He is adjacent to, and this I wasn't aware of until just this moment. I knew this was happening because I've seen, you provide Theo and I with these like cheat sheets on where guys are moving. CeeDee Lamb and Drake London are adjacent in the Dynasty rankings right now.
Well, adjacent is a strong word because there's a big gap in lifetime value.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So sometimes the guy that's wide receiver 5 being next to the guy that's wide receiver 6, it's actually a bit of a trick, right? It's a bit of an optical illusion because you look up and you're like, wait a second, there's an 80-point difference in lifetime value. It's just arbitrary that one guy's 5 and the other guy's 6. Nico Collins is right there next to A.J. Brown, who's right there next to CeeDee Lamb, who's right there next to Drake London, and then there's a big gap, a chasm up to CeeDee Lamb to get to wide. There's a big 5 wide receivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do think that if we see Nico produce at that wide receiver 4 level that we have him ranked at for seasonal, if we see that for a week or two, then Nico Collins is the guy that rises to maybe not near CeeDee Lamb levels, but significantly up in lifetime value for sure.
Yeah, and if you like this discussion, and every week, Evan gives us 10 specific stats and trends that he sees around the NFL. This is the show called Stat Masters. And so he has this podcast called Stat Masters. Check it out, whatever podcast you're using, Stat Masters. And we recently did a deep dive in this podcast and improved the production value. We've sped the podcast up. It's now more rat-a-tat-tat. We've improved the sound quality. So Evan and I, we basically went into the studio and we found a way to make this podcast really, really go. And so just check it out. See what you think. This latest episode is the first episode where we really improve the pacing and the sound quality. As Evan's learning. Like a lot of these guys at Player Profiler, there's not just this machine, this matrix they just plug into and they just start podcasting. Really, we all learn at our own pace, with the tools that we have. We share, best practices and things to use, but there's a lot of tricks of the trade, and Evan's starting to really learn those. And I think check out Stat Masters and see how he's doing. And then you can rate the show on iTunes just to let the world know what you think. And you can also email him, evan@rotounderworld.com. Any comments, any feedback about the show, anything you want to hear about the show. So I highly encourage, to engage around that show because I've learned a lot. Like I actually used a bunch of the stats that he shared on the Starter Stream show and then even carried over into my analysis with even Sigmund Bloom. So it's kind of one of my cheat code shows that I like to use is I listen to it every week. And now I'm really happy with the sort of pacing and all that. I think you're doing a great job, dude, because a solo show is not easy.
No, it is not.
No. And so when you said, hey, I'm gonna do this, I said, okay, we'll see how it goes. Okay. I mean, we'll go. Okay. All right. So I was right about Jake Ferguson. I was big right about Jake Ferguson. Can we also talk about Tank Bigsby?
I mean, I don't want to, but sure.
So Tank Bigsby has very little receiving equity. He is not, an elite runner. He's a hard runner, and he's a guy that gets the most out of most of his carries, and that's admirable, right? But he doesn't run a sub 4.5. He's not smooth out of the backfield as a receiver. he's never going to be a guy that's going to be a big difference maker in fantasy football. He's going to be a week-to-week player where, based on the matchup, he's a guy you want to start. That's not someone that I would ever recommend pursuing in Dynasty. I've always felt strongly about that, and that was one of those tension points that I've had with Theo, where, Theo, it's like automatic. He puts guys out there and we're like, we need to be higher on this guy. We need to be higher on this guy. And we're like, okay, we'll see what kind of assumptions are baked into this. Maybe a move will happen, maybe not. We'll see. And I typically stay out of it, but once in a while, I'm going to be like, nah, bro, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. We're not doing Tank Bigsby, man. There's just a few people that I'm not going to allow to get vaulted on my watch. Tank Bigsby happens to be one of those guys, and Jake Ferguson's another.
Yeah,
Jags, dude.
I think
Jags.
Yeah, literally Jags. I think that this was the Bigsby thing was kind of a small sample trap where he had elite metrics when he was the starter, and then you saw that regress over time. Although I do want to push back a little bit on the receiving thing.
Please.
He actually has been running more routes recently. He had 3 straight games with over 40% route participation, which is far higher than any other point in his career. I do think that he's capable. I'm not saying he's elite or good. But I agree with your general sentiment that he is really just another running back that it's nice to have on your team, but there's really no future dynasty value baked into that.
When I did a Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Nate Liss, he would basically, you're talking about poker, like insta-fold. He would insta-flip these guys. Whatever he could get, 3rd rounder, 2nd rounder, his first instinct was always flip, 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 flip. Guys like that, flip, instant flip. As soon as value surfaces, especially if he's going to be the starter heading into a good matchup, and you're targeting a few teams in Dynasty that need a win this week, maybe need some running back help, it's easy just to start the conversation and be like, all right, you still have your 2nd rounder, so I got Bigsby. Looks like he's the starter for the rest of the year. Let's do this. Ching, right? That's it. Done.
Yeah, I think that's quite an edge in Dynasty, is being willing to sell from your contending teams. If somebody like Bigsby pops up as a must-start this week, but you don't really need him, then just sell him away, and now you have a 2nd-round pick in the bank that you can use at a later time.
All right, so Wesley Peterson's asking, Evan, who are your top 10 Dynasty receivers? So what we're going to do is, first of all, you should subscribe to PlayerProfiler.com, the player rankings. And the player rankings are now heavily discounted. Like we've slashed the prices on everything below 50% because we only have a few weeks left in the season. So now you can get the all-in package for like $65. So it's more than a 50% discount. And that includes like the DFS Dominator, which people would pay that much for 1 week of the DFS Dominator. So we know it's a great deal. So you can just see the Dynasty rankings for yourself there, and you can see them in Superflex mode. You can see them in all different format modes. But we
got tight end premium. We got win now rankings. We got rebuild rankings.
Don't forget about the win now versus rebuild mode. So we have lots of settings, and they're really easy. It's not like complicated. It's right in front of you, little buttons, little toggle switches to go, hey, I want to see it in win now mode. Hey, I want to see it in rebuild mode. Make it easy. We will tell you, Jamar Chase has overtaken Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. That is correct?
Yes, that will be in the update that goes out later today.
That's big. I mean, Jefferson's been the wide receiver 1 for over a year. It's going on maybe 2 years. So that's a big deal. So that's happening. That's news. That's breaking news. Wide receiver 3, we have Malik Neighbors. Wide receiver 4, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Wide receiver 5, CeeDee Lamb. That's the top 5. And then we have other guys, and you can check them out on playerprofiler.com. How high is McConkey going to go up from where he is now? So we have McConkey right now at 21. We have Pickens at 19, Flowers at 20. So it goes Pickens, Flowers, McConkey. I love that little tight-knit group. Those guys are all 24 to 25 years old. They're not even 25. McConkey just turned 23. Pickens is still 20. Pickens is still 23 years old. Pickens and McConkey are the same age. Let that sink in, everybody.
Wild.
George Pickens and Ladd McConkey are the same age.
Yeah, they're in college, right?
And they went to the same college. That's wild. That's wild stuff. And Flowers has been great. Flowers has outscored both of them on a per-game basis this year.
Yeah.
And yet, it is really the perfect group, little subgroup of wide receivers right there.
Yeah, so the comparison that I made this week was Ladd McConkey versus Brian Thomas, who we have significantly ahead of this tier we're talking about. What do you think about that? Are we sure that Brian Thomas is more valuable than Ladd McConkey right now? Because I'm not. Honestly, I might rather have Ladd.
Ladd McConkey has been a victim of circumstance, a run-first offense that's also playing slow, and some bad luck. He should vault. It's difficult to even say that you would rather have Jaden Reed over him. Even though Jaden Reed's outscored him, Jaden Reed and he are a similar age, similar quarterback play. It is funny because Love and Herbert were at the same Senior Bowl, and they were clearly the best throwers of footballs. They both had beautiful deep balls. You could never, if you weren't paying attention, you'd see a deep ball like flying overhead, and you're like, was that either Love or Herbert? Because you knew it wasn't Jalen Hurts. That's just not his game. So, yeah, McConkey, he could get to as high as, I think Rashee Rice is his ceiling. I think that's as high as he can go. And then you're running into players that's a whole new tier above there, where then you're into Wilson Adunze, and that's a different tier. Nakua, totally, he's not getting in there. But you could, it's a straight line for McConkey and Pickens, and all three of these guys. All three of these guys have had big spike weeks. In fact, Zay Flowers has been the spikiest of the three. It's a straight line for those guys to go from that average of wide receiver 20 to average of wide receiver 15.
Yeah, I think you can expect all three of them to move up significantly in the update that goes out later today.
Oh, fuck yeah. I love getting out ahead of it. So in terms of stacks we're getting out ahead of, certainly it is McConkey. Certainly it is Pickens. What about Jawan Jennings? What do we do with Jawan Jennings?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that, he does fall into that wide receiver 2 to 3 range that we've talked about. It's very flat tier. There's a lot of players that can go in there. But if you
we're not talking about the McConkey range. Is it a completely no. Completely different category for Jawan Jennings.
Well, certainly not in Dynasty. In redraft, though?
Oh, no.
I mean...
Excuse me. I was talking about Dynasty. I had flipped into Dynasty mode, so all apologies. Dynasty, I think he's fascinating because Brandon Ayuk gone. He has a 40-point wide receiver 1 overall week on his resume. He's a great fit for this offense because he's such a good run blocker. He's interesting in Dynasty. Yes, absolutely, he belongs in that tier in seasonal leagues. He's right there. Like week in, week out, do I start him? Do I start McConkey? Depends on the matchup. But in Dynasty, he's not old either. And he seems to be teed up in a really nice situation, though Ricky Pearsall is coming. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, it's really tricky because Ayuk just got this huge contract. We think that Debo is more than likely going to move on soon from the Niners just because they made this Pearsall pick. They re-signed Jennings. They re-signed Ayuk. That's just where the signs are pointing. But, they don't run a ton of 11 personnel, which means that those 3 wide receivers, Ayuk, Jennings, and Pearsall, one of them is going to be off the field usually when we look at 2025. And it really complicates all of their dynasty values So, I like Jennings, but there's a very limited ceiling on him in Dynasty.
He also not a big time explosive playmaker. He's out there because he's good in the red zone. He's a good run blocker. That's
He's
not
a
where I
third
would put
down
my
guy.
chips in Dynasty. I think in longer term, this offense is going to be the Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall show
Yeah.
on the outside. How out over our skis are we willing to get with Pearsall?
Not too much, again, because Jennings is there. I love Pearsall. We all love Pearsall as a prospect, and he has flashed recently, but we do have to be concerned about the playing time. Shanahan has tended to keep his wide receivers in the doghouse when we look at Brandon Ayuk. So that is a concern for 2025, just that how will that playing time shake out? It's uncertain.
And their pass rate, has the 49ers ever had a top 5 pass rate?
No, they're always one of the last in the league, at
Right.
least since McCaffrey has been traded there.
So, I mean, but I don't know. That's an open question. Is that a function of McCaffrey, or is that a function of just the system, the
Yeah,
slow pace
yeah,
of
it's a good
play,
question.
and the run first approach? It may just be
I
the
think that the
system.
slow pace is definitely the system. I think that without
They're the slowest pace in
McCaffrey,
the league,
yeah,
1.89 plays per minute is number 32 in the NFL. This is the case against Ricky Pearsall, that there isn't a long-term reason to think that it's going to change. You know that through at least 2026, the coach is going to be Kyle Shanahan. You know that Brandon Ayuk has the contract and he is the alpha when he's healthy. They have these other options. George Kittle, Debo, like you said, probably not going to be there longer term. McCaffrey, at least another year or two, perhaps. And they bring in another. If it's gone so well with McCaffrey, you would think they would bring in another satellite back that can play big minutes and get a lot of snaps and command a lot of targets out of it. And so then where is the upside really for Pearsall? It's hard.
on a weekly basis, it's totally there, but on a season long or dynasty window, it's really not there at all.
I think Pearsall is the classic sell. I think he's a classic sell in Dynasty, and you don't just trade him for a pick. Like, I can't get a first rounder for him. No, okay, enough. You package him. He's a great guy to put in a package. He's a guy where you could start a conversation, and then by you opting to voluntarily include Pearsall in the deal, the dynamics of the package change. It gets you closer to a deal happening, and then you can actually ask for something else in return. So if your opponent happens to have one of your favorite stash running backs, let's say a Blake Corum, a Ray Davis, a Braylon Allen, and you want that guy and you want to get the deal done, well, you just say, okay, I'll put Pearsall in, you include Corum, and we have a deal. And because there hasn't been any production from Corum, and Pearsall just had 17 fantasy points and he's a sexy player, handshake, right?
Yeah, yeah. One player that I've been thinking a lot about in Dynasty has been David Montgomery. Can you flip Pearsall for Montgomery on a contending team? I would absolutely love that.
I would love that too. Oh, yeah. I would. Oh, dude, I would love that. So we should wrap this up. The couple quarterback notes we need to make before we wrap this thing up. Firstly, Richardson's back. Anthony Richardson's back. They're setting him up to fail. Why start him at home against the Bills? Why start him at home against the Lions when you can start him on the road against the Jets? Why? Why? He should have to face down Sauce Gardner. That's a good idea, right? So what? So is the fact that he's starting this week, where do we rank him, in these different formats now?
In weekly, I think he is right now just outside of the top 12 quarterbacks, just because I don't fully trust him against that Jets passing defense. That being said, I expect them to be very successful on the ground this week, and I love Jonathan Taylor. In Dynasty, it's very interesting. I think that he will be much higher in our 1 QB rankings than our Superflex rankings,
Mm.
just because he has a lot of inherent risk in his profile, just by the fact that we haven't seen him reliably succeed as like an NFL passer yet. That being said, you won't find anyone that's higher on Anthony Richardson than myself. I think that he is a good passer, especially his deep ball is already really good. But we have to be realistic in Dynasty too.
What if he gets benched this week? Jesus Christ.
I would lose my mind.
But they're in win now mode. They have to win. It's everyone's trying to win a game to save their jobs.
Well, I think we've
Right?
seen to this point that Flacco is arguably worse than Richardson right now. So it would be sheer incompetence for them not to play Richardson.
I mean, this is the ass covering mode team of all time. It's just, I mean, if they bench him, if they come out at halftime and they're down 10, which they probably won't be because the Jets are bad. The Jets are just a bad team. The problem is you don't know what you're getting from Aaron Rodgers any given week. He could be feeling it. Oh, man, this is a maximum intrigue with that game. Absolute maximum intrigue with that game. And, I try to be this anchor for our whole ranking service, to try to anchor us to reality, tether us to, sensible, not hyperbolic, emotion-driven, especially on the positive end, right? To try to be a little bit of a wet blanket on just all the enthusiasm that pops up throughout the season for guys like Tank Bigsby or whoever. But then on the other end, there are certain players where I feel like I need to plant myself in the ground and be like, he has the draft capital, he has the talent, he has the supporting cast, he's been betrayed by these reasons. We can't drop player X below player Y. We can't do that. We're not ready to do that. I don't want to be affiliated with anywhere that does that. And so one of those players right now that I am cautiously optimistic about, but it's not as much the optimism, it's just that I just don't think it's fundamentally sound to take this as the moment to drop a Caleb Williams. I can't explain it. Some things are just heuristics where I can't explain it. This is not the right time for for us to wake up and Caleb Williams is now, behind guys that have been in the league 5 years and haven't really, produced league-winning numbers. When I feel like for him to drop out of the top 12 dynasty quarterbacks, I would not like that. That just wouldn't feel right. And sometimes you can't explain that, and you just want to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's where I'm at with Caleb Williams. I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had a good reason why, hey, listen, these are all the reasons. I don't have a good reason. I just know that we can't be that place that's pushing him down to QB 15 where Bo Nix is overtaking him. I can't do it, man. I can't do it.
Yeah, definitely not Bo Nix.
I'm just saying, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's panic in the streets, man.
Yeah. I mean, the reason not to drop him that far is Shane Waldron. I could have told you 12 months ago that Shane Waldron is horrible at his job. I had to live through it as a Seahawks fan, and it was brutal. But there are serious concerns about Caleb Williams, too. It's not just the play calling. It's not just the offensive line. In fact, the Bears' offensive line ranks first in the league in time to pressure this year. And Caleb Williams is turning 32% of those pressures into sacks, which is one of the worst of the 21st century, not just this year.
That's bad.
Yeah.
So it's possible that he's Will Levis.
It is possible. It is possible. But that being said, it's only been 9 or 10 games or whatever. We got to give the guy a bit of a leash.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's not over. It's not over, but it is concerning for sure.
I mean, if we just look at the specific quarterbacks, right? In Dynasty, would you rather have Kyler Murray?
I would. I'm high on Kyler. I think I just think that he is underrated as a. I mean, right now he is undoubtedly a better quarterback than Caleb. It's not close at all, and both are somewhat young. I'm not giving Kyler Murray a huge age discount just because he's like 27 or 28. Um, I think in one of these next couple of years, Kyler is going to absolutely smash, and we're going to look back on it and say, of course he did. He's Kyler Murray.
I think in Superflex, I would rather have Brock Purdy than Caleb Williams. Superflex is just different, man. It's the same. I love our rationale for having Anthony Richardson like 5 spots higher in the QB rankings in single quarterback versus Superflex, because there isn't a market for streaming quarterbacks in Superflex, and you need to be playing guys that are ranked 22, 23 in the league. They can help win or lose championships in Superflex. Those guys aren't helping you win or lose anything in single quarterback leagues in any format. So it makes perfect sense to me that, Drake May, because he offers it all, right? Drake May has the stability of being a great passer, but also has the mobility to be a fantasy breaker. He should be top 10. Caleb Williams also has that. But in Superflex, my faith in him is not what it is in Drake May. I think Drake May has already established himself, given how few weapons he has and some of these metrics that you're talking about, as just being a much more reliable, stable option for a Superflex roster than Caleb Williams. And Brock Purdy, all he's done is deliver. This guy, he's 25 years old, and all he's putting up is 19-plus fantasy points a game. And the thing is with the 49ers defense, it's not like it's going to suddenly get better. It's not like they're going to rediscover their defense. This is the cycle. There's like a cycle of life with defenses. They're good for 2 or 3 years, and then they get older and they lose key players to free agency and injury, and then they have to rebuild the whole thing, and it's 5 years from now they'll be good again. But in the meantime, it's game on for Brock Purdy. I mean, he's putting up these numbers with the slowest pace of play in the league. So that to me is that would be the reason why, okay, not in single quarterback. I still think that the league-winning capability of Caleb Williams in single quarterback trumps whatever Brock Purdy brings to the table in terms of consistency in Superflex. But in a Superflex league, I'd rather have Brock Purdy. And then the question is, would you rather have Justin Herbert in a Superflex league? Because Justin Herbert's starting to improve, but the raw numbers for Justin Herbert just aren't there. 15 fantasy points a game, that ain't enough. That's not enough for me to say, okay, I'll take the stability of Herbert over the volatility and the unknown bust risk of Caleb Williams. I think that's the Purdy Herbert feels to me like the friction point there with Caleb Williams in Superflex. And then the big question is Kyler. Kyler has this other dynamic going on where he's 27 and he's small and he's had some injuries, and I just don't know how long he can sustain as a truly mobile quarterback that's going to be able to win games with his legs, help fantasy teams with big rushing numbers. How long can he sustain that? Till age what? 29?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we saw Russell Wilson maintain at least the escapability until he was around 32, 33.
Right.
So if that happens, then we shouldn't be super concerned in Dynasty. But the thing is, Kyler is more speed than the elusiveness of Russ. Russ didn't have that necessarily game-breaking speed that Kyler has, and we should expect that to regress a bit.
I mean, his rushing is the same this year, Kyler Murray, as it was in 2022. He's the same guy. as he was in 2022. He's not the same guy he was in 2020 or 2021. You're not going to get 800 rushing yards, but 500 rushing yards, that's what he's on pace for, to clear 500 rushing yards pretty easily. How many other quarterbacks rush for 500 yards in the NFL?
Not a ton.
Right? Just
a handful.
So you got age 27 season. Let's say he does it age 29. If he can keep it going through age 29, then you've got his age 27, 28, and 29 season still giving you 400 to 500 rushing yards. And you know he's a hit. He's not a bust risk like Caleb Williams. That is a fascinating place to be, trying to decode Kyler Murray versus Caleb Williams. Williams.
I know that Kyler is good right now, and I don't know that about Caleb. I mean, we should talk about his accuracy too. Right now, in our player profiler accuracy metrics, Caleb Williams is outside of the top 32 in all of these metrics.
Why do we chart these metrics if we're not going to use them?
What do you mean? I just used them.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's a rhetorical question.
Oh, okay.
This is rhetorical. We have the metrics. We should use them to our advantage. So that's where we could see a regression and a drop of Caleb Williams further, but not outside QB12. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Can he go from QB10 to QB12 in all formats because Kyler and Brock Purdy are just better quarterbacks for all formats? Sure. Very possible. And that's what you're looking at. And that's not crazy. I think that's just measured and logical.
Yep. Totally with you.
What do you think? Let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments. Caleb Williams, where would you rank him in Dynasty? Till next time. Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.